This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our September Board of Selectmen meeting. I'm Mike Frieden, North Haven's first Selectman, joined as always by our second Selectman, Mr. William Piper, and our third Select Woman, Miss Sally Buemi. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to ask everyone to stand for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2 weeks ago, ladies and gentlemen, we lost one of our beloved firefighters, Anthony DeSimone. All of us here on this board knew him. He was a personal friend of mine. His wife, Pam, has served our community, sitting on one or two boards and commissions. And 8 months after the tragic death of his best friend, Matt Wirtz, during those 8 months, Anthony DeSimone, his primary focus, in addition to his family and his job here as a North Haven firefighter, was to help Matt Wirtz's family. And the man was just a remarkable individual. We miss him, we love him, and tonight I'd like to ask everyone for a moment of silence for Lieutenant Anthony DeSimone. Thank you very much. Item number 3, any public comment to tonight's agenda?
I have one.
Sally.
I noticed while I was reviewing on the bottom of page 3, item 19, I think we just have to amend. It says resolved that the Board of Finance, I think that's supposed to be Board of Selectmen,
Yep.
because the Board of Finance isn't here, and they already recommended.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
I mean, all the other ones
Good.
were changed to Board of Selectmen, Board of Selectmen. So I'll make a motion to amend item 19 to read resolve that the Board of Selectmen recommends, etc.
Okay, we have a motion on item 19. Is there a second?
I'll second Sally's motion for that amendment.
All right, motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, Sally.
Okay?
All right, we'll move to item number 4, the approval of the minutes of the Board of Selectmen meeting from August 3rd.
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There was no first selectman overview for tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Sally and Bill have a great deal of reading tonight to do. So without further ado, our leadoff hitter in this lineup tonight for the reading, Ms. Sally
Why don't we
Buemi.
have Bill do 6 and I'll do 7?
Okay, Bill, you lead us off, number 6.
Thank you. Item 6 on the agenda is to consider and act upon a resolution authorizing First Selectman Michael J. Fried as the chief elected official of the town of North Haven to submit an application to the Connecticut State Library for $500,000 in order to undertake a state public library construction grant fiscal year 2023 to 2024 and execute a contract for the North Haven Memorial Library Improvements Project. Based on number 6, I'll make a motion.
Well, that's the next 7 is
really
the motion.
Oh, it's the next one, I'm
So
sorry.
I think the to consider sections,
Yeah.
Mike, are you just going to just give any intro about it, or do you just want us to read it through? Because it's so much.
Yeah, I think we went through this at the Board of Finance meeting.
Right.
So much tonight, so we're just going to read right through it. We'll certainly
Okay.
answer any questions afterwards, okay?
Okay, so, thank you. So I will do number 7, resolve that the town of North Haven may enter into a contract with and deliver to the Connecticut State Library and any and all documents which it deems necessary or appropriate for a state public library construction grant of $500,000 for the North Haven Memorial Library Improvements Project located at 17 Elm Street in North Haven, Connecticut. And be it further resolved that Michael J. Frieda, as first selectman of the town of North Haven, is authorized and directed to execute and deliver any and all documents on behalf of the town of North Haven and to do and perform all acts and things which he deems necessary or appropriate to carry out the terms of such documents. Michael J. Frieda now holds the office of First Selectman, and further, he has held the office since December 1st, 2009. Okay, well, I'll make that motion.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
All right, motion, second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for that vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next.
Number 8 is consider and act upon a resolution recommending a $355,000 appropriation and bond authorization for repairs and improvements to the town's recycling transfer center, consisting of repairs to existing infrastructure, capital improvements, and the acquisition and replacement of related equipments.
Okay, number 9, resolved that the Board of Selectmen recommends that the town of North Haven appropriate $355,000 for repairs and improvements to the town's recycling transfer center. The project shall consist of repairs to existing infrastructure, capital improvements, and the acquisition and replacement of related equipment. The appropriation may be spent for design, demolition, and construction costs, equipment, furnishings, materials, site improvements, architect's fees, engineering fees, other consultants' fees, legal fees, net temporary interest, and other financing costs and other expenses related to the project, and that the town issue bonds or notes and temporary notes in an amount not to exceed $355,000 to finance the appropriation. So I will make that motion as read.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for that vote. All those in favor?
Aye. Next item on the agenda is number 10, consider and act upon a resolution recommending $815,000 appropriation and bond authorization for water pollution control facility studies consisting of a sanitary sewer evaluation study, an inflow and infiltration study.
Okay. Number 11, resolved that the Board of Selectmen recommends that the town of North Haven appropriate $815,000 for water pollution control facility studies. The project shall consist of a sanitary sewer evaluation study and an inflow and infiltration study. The appropriation may be spent for survey costs, study costs, engineering fees, other consultants' fees, legal fees, net temporary interest, and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project, and that the town issue bonds or notes and temporary notes in an amount not to exceed $815,000 to finance the appropriation. The total amount of bonds issued shall be reduced by the amount of grants or other funds received and not separately appropriated for the project. Such grants and other funds are anticipated to be approximately $447,550. I'll move that resolution as read.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I will second that resolution.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for that vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is to consider and act upon a resolution recommending a $6,407,000 appropriation and bond authorization for repairs and improvements to various town roads and bridges, consisting of Pool Road drainage improvements, Kings Highway bridge replacement, Hartford Turnpike head wall replacement, and the milling and paving of various town roadways.
Okay, item 13. Resolved that the Board of Selectmen recommends that the town of North Haven appropriate $6,407,000 for repairs and improvements to various town roads and bridges. The project shall consist of Pool Road drainage improvements, Kings Highway bridge replacement, Hartford Turnpike head wall replacement, and the milling and paving of various town roadways. The appropriation The appropriation may be spent for design, demolition, and construction costs, removal of waste materials, paving and materials, installation of manholes and drainage risers, traffic protection, including signage and police and flag personnel equipment, structural materials, site improvements, survey costs, architect's fees, engineering fees, other consultants' fees, legal fees, net temporary interest and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project, and that the town issue bonds or notes and temporary notes in an amount not to exceed $6,407,000 to finance the appropriation. The total amount of bonds issued shall be reduced by the amount of grants or other funds received and not separately appropriated for the project. Such grants and other funds are anticipated to be approximately $3,272,000. I'll move that resolution as read.
Is there a second?
I'll second Sally's resolution.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for that vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Next is to consider and act upon a resolution recommending a $193,000 appropriation and bond authorization for the 5-mile brook channel clearing conservation project.
And item 15, resolved that the Board of Selectmen recommends that the town of North Haven appropriate $193,000 for the 5-mile brook channel clearing conservation project. The appropriation may be spent for design, construction, equipment, materials, site improvements, architect's fees, engineering fees, other consultants' fees, legal fees, net temporary interest, and other financing costs and other expenses related to the project, and that the town issue bonds or notes and temporary notes in an amount not to exceed $193,000 to finance the appropriation. The total amount of bonds issued shall be reduced by the amount of grants or other funds received and not separately appropriated for the project. Such grants and other funds are anticipated to be approximately $148,000. I will move that motion as read.
I'll second it as read.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for that vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Next is to consider and act upon a resolution recommending a $751,000 appropriation and bond authorization for various repairs and improvements to sports and recreation facilities, consisting of repairs and improvements to playscapes, town green bandstand, and repairs and installation of lighting at town athletic fields.
Before I read 17, this is, item 16 does say consider, and we usually do have some discussion. I just have a quick question before I read and make the motion on this particular one. I just had a concern about the installation of lighting at town athletic fields. On June 6th of 2022, we had a town meeting where we authorized a $3.5 million bonding project for lots of different athletic field improvements. And I remember one of the big selling points was lighting at the Brozac softball field and at the DeMayo baseball field. And that, the emphasis was on safety. Now, it says here for this new money, this 751, it also talks about installation of lighting at town athletic fields. Are these other fields, like maybe Grover Wyman, or is
No.
it's the same fields?
Same fields, yeah.
So the 3.5 million didn't cover it,
That's
inflation?
exactly right.
Okay, so this is a repeat to get that lighting done.
That's right.
All right, because it says town athletic fields with a broad brush, I just wanted to clarify. So we're asking the people to bond for this again because the 3.5 fell a little short.
Exactly.
Okay, I will read item 17. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. 17, resolved that the Board of Selectmen recommends that the town of North Haven appropriate $751,000 for various repairs and improvements to sports and recreation facilities. The project shall consist of repairs and improvements to playscapes, town green, bandstand, and the repairs and installation of lighting at town athletic fields. The appropriation may be spent for design, demolition, and construction costs, equipment, materials, site improvements, survey costs, architect's fees, engineering fees, other consultant fees, legal fees, net temporary interest and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project, and that the town issue bonds or notes and temporary notes in an amount not to exceed $751,000 to finance the appropriation. The total amount of bonds issued shall be reduced by the amount of grants or other funds received and not separately appropriated for the project. Such grants and other funds are anticipated to be approximately $282,000. I will move the resolution as read.
Just maybe along the same lines, based on your comments, or your question, is that I think all these resolutions anticipate that there will be grants or other funds that might be received that would reduce the 751,000, so, which I think
Yes.
is very true, just, which is maybe a little bit hard for anybody listening online to follow. The first number is the total amount that we're considering or recommending for appropriation and bonding, but with any luck, in terms of grants or other funding that we might get, these numbers would be reduced. So based on the resolution as read by Sally, I'll second it.
Right. Following up on Bill's comment, if anyone's doing the math as we're going along, and we haven't even finished, the total amount, and this probably will be discussed in greater detail at the town meeting that we'll be calling soon, but the total amount that we're asking the citizens to bond for is just under 17 million. My math was 16,966,000, but the total of anticipated reimbursements is about 10.5 million. Again,
We're looking at a net of about 5.9 million.
yeah, so, and that's why, I had inquired at the, to Lynn Sadowski, how confident are you on those? Anticipated is an interesting word. Right. It's anticipated, and so she felt quite confident. And so I just wanted to give that total for the folks listening.
And we also have the ability, the way this is designed, you're going to hear from me at the town meeting, so I'll be presenting this on September 18th, Val, I think it is, September 18th.
Yep.
So I want to take the audience through it in its entirety. We're not bundling all these as all or nothing. Each resolution is separate. Each resolution we voted on separately by the citizens. But in the unanticipated event that we don't get at the grant, then we're not obligated to bond for the money. So we always have that as a mechanism. We feel confident that all these grants are going to come in. But let's say it doesn't come in. We have a choice not to do the bonding for it. So with this, we got a lot of safety nets here. And, we're never going to bond 16.9 million. We're never going to borrow 16.9 million. The maximum exposure, or the exposure, is after the grants, like to Sally's point, about 5.9 million.
Right, and we're seeking authorization.
That's right.
Our charter says to bond, the Board of Finance has to recommend, and then the Board of Selectmen has to recommend to a town meeting. The Board of Finance recommended all of this at their last meeting, and now we're recommending. But it's my understanding that we actually do, if we anticipate all of these reimbursements, we will be bonding for the full amount. I thought that's what Lynn said. You have to spend it to get the reimbursement.
Well,
So the
she did
net,
say that.
yeah, so the
Yeah.
net, bottom line
Right.
is the 5.9.
Right.
But I think that we have to make that clear. You have to spend to get a reimbursement. We all shop and get coupons and you get it back, a refund,
Yep.
So that's kind of what this is. It's a spend it and get reimbursed. But what you're saying is if we don't think we're going to get the anticipated reimbursement, we won't do it.
That's right.
Right. So, okay.
Okay.
So
I think there's some language in there too, at least in some of the resolutions that you've read, Sally, that
yes.
talk about like temporary notes as well, which,
Well, yes, we
which I
always,
think might be, exactly what you're saying in terms of us doing it, but then getting reimbursed.
That's exactly right.
As
So
opposed
we
to
might
longer-term
not,
bonds and notes.
exactly. Whenever we bond, we do temporary notes and then issue the bonds.
And you know, the average person who may be watching may not understand what we're just talking about, but let me explain it this way. There's certain IRS rules and regulations. When you're running a government and overseeing finances, IRS rules and regulations are very important. When it comes to municipal bonds, they're tax-exempt bonds for the person who is buying the bonds. In order to get the notes, you have to do the bonds. And then once you do the bond, the overall bond, then you can tap into the notes. You have to bond to do the notes. In other words, you can't get the notes unless you bond. I know it sounds complicated, but rest assured, ladies and gentlemen, we know what we're doing here.
Right, there's a very strict process.
Yes.
Of what goes, of progression.
Yes.
So I believe I read 17. And
We had a motion and a second, but we did
Yes.
not have a
Have a
vote.
vote.
Okay, so we have to vote on 17?
Yes,
I
please.
made the motion as read.
And
Second?
I've already seconded it, and
Oh.
I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is to consider and act upon a resolution recommending a $5,700,000 appropriation in bond authorization for repairs and improvements to the Temple Pines Senior Housing Facility, consisting of interior and exterior repairs and improvements to windows, the roof, building systems, heating and cooling, exterior grounds, and other related structural and site work.
Okay, and I will do item 19. Resolved that the Board of Selectmen recommends that the town of North Haven appropriate $5,700,000 for repairs and improvements to the Temple Pines Senior Housing Facility. The project shall consist of interior and exterior repairs and improvements to windows, the roof, building systems, heating and cooling, exterior grounds, and other related structural and site work. The appropriation may be spent for design, demolition, and construction costs, equipment, furnishings, materials, site improvements, survey costs, architect's fees, engineering fees, other consultants' fees, legal fees, net temporary interest, and other financing costs and other expenses related to the project, and that the town issue bonds or notes and temporary notes in an amount not to exceed $5,700,000 to finance the appropriation. The total amount of bonds issued shall be reduced by the amount of grants or other funds received and not separately appropriated for the project. Such grants and other funds are anticipated to be approximately $5,700,000. I'll make that motion as read.
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is to consider and act upon a resolution recommending a $2,745,000 appropriation in bond authorization for repairs, improvements, and replacements to various town buildings, consisting of repairs and improvements to Town Hall, North Haven Library, including to the roof and lighting, the senior center, including replacement of a van, Walter Garwich Community Pool roof replacement, fire training bays, and community services facilities related to BH Care.
And number 20, resolved that the Board of Selectmen recommends that the town of North Haven appropriate $2,745,000 for repairs, improvements, and replacements to various town buildings. The project shall consist of repairs and improvements to Town Hall, North Haven Library, including to the roof and lighting and senior center, including replacement of a van, Walter Gorridge Community Pool roof replacement, fire training bays, and community services facilities related to BH Care. The appropriation may be spent for design, demolition, and construction costs, equipment, furnishings, materials, site improvements, survey costs, architect's fees, engineering fees, other consultants' fees, legal fees, net temporary interest, and other financing costs and other expenses related to the project, and that the town issue bonds or notes and temporary notes in an amount not to exceed $2,745,000. to finance the appropriation. The total amount of bonds issued shall be reduced by the amount of grants or other funds received and not separately appropriated for the project. Such grants and other funds are anticipated to be approximately $841,000. I will make that motion as read.
I will second that resolution.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is item number 22. Yeah, I think we have the same situation in 22 before I read it, that it's recommendations of the Board of Finance, which it was, but I think we're now making recommendations of the Board of Selectmen under 22.
No, we're calling the annual town meeting.
No, excuse me.
Is that correct or no?
No, what this is pertaining strictly to the budget transfers.
The budget transfer.
So that
Yep,
is
I'm
with the
following it now.
recommendation of the Board of Finance, so that's what we're saying. We were going to send.
Yes.
You're going to send it to the town meeting with the recommendation of the Board of Finance.
So this case, it is accurate, as opposed to the other adjustment that Sally correctly pointed out.
I believe so.
Thank you. I wasn't focusing on the fact that it was the annual, budget transfers over $20,000. So now that I'm focused correctly, we're going to consider and act upon a resolution calling for the annual town meeting to be held Monday, September 18th, 2023, at 7 p.m. in the auditorium of North Haven High School, 221 Elm Street in North Haven, Connecticut, to consider, discuss, and act upon resolutions in accordance with the recommendation of the Board of Finance concerning the adjustment of appropriations of certain line items among the various departments in the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget, transferring amounts over $20,000 in the total sum of $581,580, and to act upon the aforesaid appropriations and bond authorizations. There we go.
Right, this is something that we do
Every
every
year.
year to balance our books. I just had one question at the last Board of Finance meeting. Board of Finance member Nancy Barrett had inquired of the controller about some lists. I never saw the list, but a list of some transfers over 20,000 that she wanted an explanation of why they weren't included. You might remember a few years ago, she raised the same issue and an error was discovered and we had to recall the town meeting. Will that be resolved before this meeting?
Well, I think the list.
information that she requested?
I think the information will be sent out to the board.
To the board?
That's
Okay.
my understanding. So.
Okay, so we'll get some closure on that question. Because I think it was asked, and the controller said she would look into it.
Yeah.
So it just struck me that loose end should be tied up before.
Okay.
So with that said, I will, of course, make the resolution to call the meeting. Resolved that the annual town meeting be held Monday, September 18th, 2023, at 7 p.m. in the auditorium of the North Haven High School, 221 Elm Street in North Haven, Connecticut, to act upon the recommendation of the Board of Finance concerning the adjustment of appropriations of certain line items among the various departments in the fiscal year 22-23 budget, transferring amounts over $20,000 in the total sum of $581,580, and to act upon the above recommendation concerning the aforesaid appropriations and bond authorizations, and that the notice for the annual town meeting presented at this meeting be approved and signed. Notice and proposed resolutions are on file and available for inspection in the office of the town clerk. So I will make the motion as read for that call.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second Sally's motion.
All right, any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for that vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next item.
And last item on, in terms of their number of property tax refunds, I'll make a motion to approve nothing out of the ordinary. I'll make a motion to approve those property tax refunds.
Second?
All right, a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for that vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And before we come to the last couple of items on the agenda, just another reminder, September 18th, I'll be standing up there in front of a town meeting explaining all this and answering any questions that the public may have. So with that being said, we are now, it looks like, at the item that says the next regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen is Thursday, October 5th, here at North Haven's Memorial Town Hall. Public comment. I see Dorothy Logan, you raised your hand first. Please come up to the microphone.
Did you need my address?
That's standard dot, yes, if you could, yes.
Dorothy Logan, 2065 Hartford Turnpike. I'm speaking today as a member of your senior citizen group who's lived in town for about 50 years. But I also am speaking as somebody who was fortunate enough to teach in this town for 25 years.
Thank you
And
for
I
your
was in all the buildings except the high school. And I have wonderful, wonderful memories, except for May, June, and September, when the heat builds. And one of the reasons I'm making the statement is because I think people my age who went through the public schools system, we didn't have air conditioning back then, and we survived. But things nowadays are different. We were able to open the doors, open the windows. The janitors at night would open the windows, and some of the hot air would be able to escape. So we started in the morning, it would be a little bit cooler, and the heat would build. That's no longer the case for security reasons. And now we'll have a week or 4 days of early dismissals. And unfortunately, fortunately, we have a middle school and a high school that have air conditioning. But they're dismissing early, I assume, because they're needed to take care of younger brothers and sisters. I mean, logically.
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
Okay. I know this is a school problem, an aging building problem. We also know it will be about $4 million to put air conditioning in the 4 elementary buildings. I don't think the school can do that by themselves. I see this as a town problem and a school problem. And I see it as an equity issue because we have, thank God, we have a town hall, we have a library, senior center. All our buildings are air conditioned except for the 4 remaining elementary schools. So obviously I'm going to make remarks at the Board of Education meeting, but I guess my question to you or comment to you is I would be hoping that the education and the town side could work together to start planning for the future, to come up with some solutions to make things better.
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, this past week, both Patrick and I have been fielding phone calls, and I've received emails, and I pride myself on responding to everybody. And I said to one nice woman who called, and a couple of people here called me also, that I'm open to any suggestions to help the children. It has to start with the Board of Ed making a recommendation to me. And in the end, it could be something like we're doing right here.
Right,
the bonding. So the other thing, and this ties into your point, with school security, you can't open the windows now. So you've got these young children, these poor young children. Some of them have asthma, as some people have pointed out to me, and they're baking in the classroom. So we have to figure this out. But I need to see a plan, and the Board of Ed has to present a plan. And I said to someone who called, in fact he's here tonight, that we've got to be careful of the unintended consequences. The plan has to include, if we're putting in the elementary schools, new HVAC systems in the ceiling, we have to be careful about asbestos. Those schools
I know.
So it's a complicated thing.
Oh, I know.
In an effort to boil it down to a more simple solution, I'm not sure if this can be done, but if there was a way, a high-powered air conditioner can go into every classroom and cool each classroom the cost of that would be much cheaper than trying to put a 4-year program together and retrofit all these schools and run the risk of an asbestos problem. So I'm open to the topic, Dot, and Patrick and I will be meeting. I'm going to suggest to him put a plan together, and we got to figure this out. I agree.
Oh, okay, I'm so glad to hear,
Yes.
because this is a discussion that comes up
Yes.
about once a year. Everybody gets hot and bothered,
Mm-hmm.
and then it gets cool, and then the next thing you know, it's May, and we're having the same discussion.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm very thankful to hear
Yes.
that the town and the school system can work together for the benefit of.
That will happen.
Okay,
You know, and
good.
not that this makes it any, this is not a justification, but, you know, being involved with the other mayors and first selectmen across the state, this is a problem. This is a
Oh,
problem
yeah.
all over.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
So it's got to be addressed.
Yeah, there's, matter of fact, the Register newspaper yesterday
Yeah.
was really, I thought was a very good article, and there was another article I was reading, and this is really a nationwide problem, because
It
so
is.
many of our elementary schools
Yep.
were built in the 60s.
Yep.
And, you know,
We will figure it out, Dorothy. We'll figure it out. It may take some time, but, you know, when I say take some time, that doesn't suggest that we're going to just push this down the road. I want to see a plan as to what this would take.
and I guess that's what I was saying, if I came back in January, would there be, you know, in checking, you know, I just want to, like a reassurance, we've had some meetings. I don't expect the problem to be solved by May 1st.
Right.
I mean, that's naive, but, you know, all creative things, all little things that we can do
Yes.
as we're making bigger plans.
Yes.
So.
I agree.
okay.
So that's the plan on my side. I'll be meeting with Patrick, because we've both been getting calls, and I'm going to ask him to have the people put a plan together, see what it would take, and then in the end, I hope it can get to this point where we go to the town meeting and we doing the same thing then that we're doing now.
Okay, and I can also tell you as a senior, you know, I like everybody else, I'm not thrilled about having taxes go up, but this is one thing I would willingly be happy to have an increase in my taxes to pay for
Yeah.
this coming generation of students, just like people paid for my own children.
Yeah, that's a good philosophy, Dot. That's
Thank you.
great. It's
Yeah,
good philosophy.
I think Dot makes a great point, because I think her point about these changing times with security measures and not being able to open windows will resonate well with older citizens who will think, wow, we didn't have
Right.
air conditioning. So I think that your point will be well accepted, and I certainly support it. And I think we just have to look at different
Ideas.
proposals, whether we go forward with an HVAC system or the idea of air conditioners in the schools. I think that we have to get a couple of plans proposed with dollar amounts
Yes.
and decide, because this would go
Yeah.
as a bonding project to the town meeting, and I would be fully supportive of that endeavor to get air conditioning in those schools.
Yeah,
And
also-
some of them are, Ridge Road is in from
Yeah.
the 50s.
Oh, I did 1948.
Okay.
Yeah.
48, I
Yeah.
stand corrected.
Yeah. So, well, but it's the same.
Because you said 60s, I think
Yeah,
Green
well,
Acres.
Mercer's and Montauk's are
and-
sister schools.
Yep, they're 60s, and Clintonville was, I think, 69 or
So,
70.
yeah,
But
but I was also.
you made
gonna
a
say-
great point.
I think the special ed parents' community would back it too, because what people don't realize, we have students who, not necessarily special ed, but special ed population that are on medication, that are very heat sensitive. So that when you're putting them in a room that's hot, they're going to be more sensitive.
Yeah.
And they got to go out to the nurse. So it just causes disruption in the classroom. So,
You know, one final point, Dot, whatever option that we end up doing is going to have to include, this is a question I'm going to be asking, an upgrade of those electrical systems there. But they may even not be able to handle an air conditioner, as was pointed out to me by, Mr. Friedman's here, he pointed that out to me, actually, so we're going to look at the options.
oh yeah,
so.
I mean, this is not easy, you know, so it's complicated and it's,
Yep.
but good luck.
Thank you.
I'm glad for the commitment.
Yes, Mr. Friedman, please step to the microphone. How are you doing, Scott?
It's been an interesting, I'll call it 2-week period. So, I'm going to pick. I'm sorry. Scott Friedman, 17 Cooper Road. So, I am the parent of a new kindergartner at Ridge Road, aforementioned school. I am exceedingly happy to hear bipartisan support for engaging in the discussion about air conditioning. My daughter exited school with a red face, thankfully a happy red face, every day this week, and we've already had 2 days of early dismissals. We've got an early dismissal day tomorrow due to the lack of air conditioning. I just want to reflect that this isn't just the product of the nationwide and the sort of general challenges of not having air conditioning in older schools. This is also, in my mind, and I've spoken at multiple town meetings, at Board of Finance meetings, about, frankly, bipartisan budget pressures that are driven by both the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. This year's budget primarily raised police, fire, and sanitation, and education, which the budget workshops came out with a 3% or 2.9% increase request, was cut down $250,000 further. So I want to challenge, as I did when I was on the phone with the superintendent today, for you all to think more broadly, not just about what numbers you want to hit from a budgetary perspective, but really what the students need. I really do appreciate Dot's tremendous service to the town and her wisdom with respect to the differential from the 1950s and even 80s until now. But I also want to say that not only do we have to close the doors, but Connecticut has been impacted almost doubly by global warming from other places in this country. Extreme weather is not going away. And I want to reiterate another thing, which is that when we talk about HVAC, we're not just talking about air conditioning. Honestly, the most important letter in that is the V. It's the ventilation. Ridge Road does not have any fans in the gym. And this is really shocking to me, the fan in my daughter's classroom, I would have expected it would have been bought in 1975 in an old rusty silver fan. No, it's brand new. It was on my teacher's adopt a teacher wish list. So just reiterating that this board and the Board of Finance's bipartisan pressure on the budget, especially the education budget, is putting us in a position where our teachers need to go on Amazon and set up a wish list and then have to get onto an Adopt a Teacher website to have students in their class or other parents in the district take pity on them and get fans, not even air conditioning. So I'm getting a little bit heated myself over the last 2 weeks. But that brings me to point 2, which is really the primary reason I'm standing at a Board of Selectmen meeting and not at the Board of Education next week, which I will be at and I will speak at, and not at the Board of Finance meeting. But that is that in this week's Quad Town Advisor, our third select woman, Sally Buemi, used her I was just thinking column to castigate the school district, saying that she was, I think, discouraged was the word, and using 2 exclamation points to point to a 126th in Connecticut ranking in the U.S. News and World Report. Now, I have no reason whatsoever, third select woman, to understand or to believe that you had knowledge that the ratings were incorrect. However, as our ratings, and I looked at the Connecticut report card for schools, we got a 76.2. There are 54 schools ahead of us and 107 behind us. That U.S. News and World Report puts us behind neighboring towns like Hamden, whose test scores are lower, whose graduation rates are lower, whose basically AP participation is lower. And so I urge you to A, reach out to the Board of Ed, to the superintendent, when you have a concern about our school system. I frankly looked at that number and said, that doesn't fit with anything I know about the North Haven school system. And you can absolutely hear from everything I've said to date, the school system isn't perfect, the town isn't perfect, public education isn't perfect. But at the end of the day, I go to just about every Board of Ed meeting, and I comment at most of them, positively, negatively, supporting our educators, supporting our Board of Ed. I am, frankly, concerned about this. I spoke to the superintendent today for a number of minutes about the U.S. News and World Report. He's not ready to determine exactly what happened, but he's looking into whether missing and inaccurate coding of information, not a decrease in performance, is what led to that 126th. It seems, from some numbers that I'm going to give you before I leave, that our AP participation is not being reflected. AP course participation of 3% does not concur with the AP participation that I've seen in presentations by Melinda McKenna and other places. And when that is paired with a school quality rating of 8 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 compared to Connecticut schools, that doesn't fly with 126 out of 150. And that is the denominator. So I'm left reeling from the, honestly, attack on our school system and also on people in an alternate campaign, where I simply can say, we can have a conversation outside about a number of things that you've mentioned. However, if the ranking proves to be based on incorrect coding, can you please commit to correcting the record in the Quad Town Advisor? Our town, our teachers, our administrators, our Board of Ed are owed the truth and would benefit from elected officials who champion our district and provide the resources needed to make our district successful and attractive to new residents and to the residents who are already here. I think I've spoken in the past at Board of Ed meetings that I've heard of way too many students, especially students in marginalized populations, who've left the school system due to mental health issues or racial discrimination or lack of support for a variety of special needs. Now, those are all problems that are global, and they're problems that we know exist in North Haven. And frankly, this district is working really hard to make it better. And so I urge you, if the ratings turn out to be incorrect, and I'm going to hand you the paper that shows some of the information, that you just retract that statement.
Well, I studied the U.S. News and World Report survey in depth. First, I did base that one statement in my column on the results of the U.S. News and World Report survey. I have always held U.S. News and World Report in high esteem with their rankings and surveys on a variety of issues for our country. And so I had no reason to question it. I know that their criteria was based on performance of state-required tests, graduation rate rank, and how well prepared our graduates were for college. Our college readiness percentage was 31.4, which was 91st. Our AP participation rate was 37%. Our overall scorecard was 64.41, and the state assessment performance rank was 180th. And so looking at all of those numbers, the 126 didn't seem mathematically shocking to me.
Oh, it's not mathematically shocking. The problem is this isn't
Yes.
a U.S. News and World Report problem. Just so
Okay.
we're clear, this
Right,
is
no,
a problem
but,
with the way
if
that things were coded.
I listened to your entire statement. If I could just finish, I just read, I didn't just look at a number and go, oh my God. I studied in detail the survey, not only of North Haven, but of other towns in our DURG. Simsbury was 14. Milford is in our DURG. Foran was 46th. Law was 51st. Hamden was 115, and Lyman Hall was 104. And I studied in depth all of their numbers as well. You know, you click on and you can see. So I didn't just say, oh God, 126. I thought I did some due diligence. Now, I will answer your question. If it is proven to me that U.S. News and World Report was provided with incorrect data, then
That's
certainly
exactly
I would acknowledge that in writing when I'm allowed to write my next column. I can't write my next column until after election season because they don't allow me to write my column during election season. I could write it in a letter to the editor. So if I have shown that the data that I just gave, those numbers, the 31.4, the 37, the scorecard of 64.41, and then the overall rating, they have different verbal classifications. Ours was, quote, well below expectations, unquote. So all of that criteria, I didn't look at it and say, oh, 126 can't be right.
No,
So-
but
if I have shown that U.S. News and World Report made a mistake or was given wrong information, then I will retract that. But I still believe that we need new people on the Board of Ed, and I'm entitled to that opinion. So thank you.
Yeah, so just to be,
Here's your,
thing. So the thing that I was showing you is that college entrance by the Connecticut report card shows us consistently above the state average, somewhere around 78. And, you know, to your point, the numbers that U.S. News and World Report had don't add up incorrectly. I'm not, and I said it, I'm going to reiterate it. I don't believe you had any knowledge whatsoever of the coding mistakes.
well, thank you for saying that, because
Yeah.
of course not, and I'm not
Absolutely,
a statistician. They have experts that evaluate
Yeah.
and weigh different criteria, I'm sure, in different amounts, and came up with this number based on these numbers.
For sure, and
so
it's
I
just,
had
it's
no doubt
shockingly
but to
low.
believe it.
Yeah, it's shockingly low that our college participation rate would be in the 30s, and that we'd still be, our college entrance capabilities would be in the 30s, and yet we're still able to send our kids to very competitive colleges and a variety of, you know, kids. I mean, frankly, there's a discussion about academic rigor and the National Honor Society average, and the number of people that are breaking the GPA mark that, you know, weighted that is needed is high enough that that's well beyond the 31%. So I do not believe that you had this information, quite the opposite, but I, upon seeing that information and upon knowing this district, went to the superintendent, went to Board of Ed members and said, this stinks, this doesn't make sense. And I would like to see the same thing before it's printed in a paper and before it's used within the primary election. Now, hearing personally that you are unable to write your column during election season puts an even heavier weight on how inappropriate Sunday's column was, because frankly, you used it for electoral purposes. Now, it may not have been Democrat versus Republican, but I frankly think you're spending more time and more effort to oust incumbent Board of Ed members who are doing a great service to this town, who have invested tireless numbers of hours. And I will say, if you weren't supposed to write during election season, you should have listened to that.
I didn't receive the notice until after the column was published.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let me make that clear. I did not receive the note. They wouldn't have published it. They have their own time frame, they meaning the advisor. So I just received notice of this happens every municipal election season. And I received the notice, today's Thursday, yesterday. So, thank you. And I will look for some sort of correction and act accordingly. I appreciate your time and attention coming tonight, Mr. Friedman.
Okay. Any other comments? Mary White.
Mary White, Summer Lane. I just wanted to, before I begin my prepared comments. I just wanted to say that as far as the children and the heat, I did go to school in an elementary school that did not have the air conditioning, so we were able to open the windows, and that helped. But I look at it as a public health and safety issue, and so I definitely hope that, based on what I've heard, that the superintendent, that the Board of Education, that they put this as an agenda item on their next meeting, and that they discuss it, because if you all are waiting for them to come up with a proposal, then they need to do that. So anyway, those are just my thoughts on that. So I'd like to start my comments with 6 questions for consideration for the board and for the residents. 1, do you live within a mile of 250 Universal Drive or 260 Universal Drive? 2, do you live within a mile of 48 Giles Avenue, 51 Giles Avenue, 100 United Drive, or 400 North Frontage Road? 3, do you live within a mile of 200 Valley Service Road, 100 Valley Service Road, 91 Washington Avenue, or 63 Washington Avenue? 4, do you live within a mile of I-91? 5, do you care about the character of the town of North Haven? 6, does the public's health and safety matter to you? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then please come to the September 11 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting at 7 o'clock in the library community room. Why attend? The addresses in the questions are locations for potential digital billboards. During a public hearing at the meeting, a billboard overlay district is being proposed for I-91 in North Haven. They want to litter our town's beautiful landscape with gigantic digital billboards 15 feet by 60 feet and 35 feet in height from the property grade. There will be 750 feet between digital billboards located on minimum 4 acres on IG-80 and IL-80 properties. Digital billboards can be 200 feet from parks, playgrounds, cemeteries, and they can be only 500 feet from residential neighborhoods. These monstrosities are 900 square feet in size, with 2 digital faces that will be lit 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The messages can change a minimum every 7 seconds. Here is an example of the frequency using the change or flip of every 10 seconds for 6 messages in 1 minute. It is 360 message changes or flips in 1 hour and 8,640 message changes or flips in 24 hours. And that's just one side of the digital billboard. Many residents will be able to see these digital billboards from their homes and will be negatively impacted. All residents will be able to see these digital billboards simply while driving in town. 1 digital billboard is too many. They seek permission to permit digital billboards on I-91 in North Haven. If permission is received, digital billboards will be here forever. We and our families and our friends, we will all be long gone, but digital billboards will still be here. And so once again, I ask residents to please attend the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting Monday, September 11, 7 o'clock at the library community room, and tell the commission to vote no on this billboard overlay district. And one last note, please call land use at 203-239-5321 on September 11th, Monday, to verify digital billboards are still on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, thank you. Mr. Katz?
Good evening, Sherman Katz, Sherwood Drive. As the meeting went on, my list got longer and longer. Mary's absolutely right. For medical reasons, I can't attend Monday. I wrote a letter to the commission, handed it into Alan's office today, asked him to read it to all the members. My opposition to this ridiculous situation. And I'm asking if the Board of Selectmen can institute an ordinance that would prohibit lighted signs within the town's boundary.
Well,
I don't know what the legal answer is to
Yeah, it's
that.
not the Board of Selectmen, Sherman. It has to go to a town meeting, the
Town
attorneys,
meeting.
and then
Okay.
the public votes on it, so.
We would call a town
Right, we call it
meeting,
town
but
meeting, right, yeah.
I'm asking you to see what you can do.
Okay.
The Board of Education had a surplus this year. Do you know what the number is?
It's, I'm not-
Approximate number?
Whatever it is,
About
less than.
400
less- it's less-
441.
Yes, slightly less than half a million.
441,000.
And last year?
It was about 670.
And the year before?
845, and then the year before, $1,007,000.
Okay. It sounds critical of the Board of Finance. And in spite of what this gentleman was talking about, cutting money to the Board of Education, they always over budget. And we allow it. And you set up a program where if they over budget, if they have money surplus left over, they can keep it. At one time, they were not supposed to keep it, were supposed to turn it back into the town. You did them a favor by doing that. In the past several years, you've allowed them to accumulate well over $1.5 million, $2 million, which would have gone a long way towards air conditioning in the schools. I know that there are guidelines for how to use that money. I built in this town in 1968, 55 years ago. One of the main reasons for coming to this town was the school system. My first child was entering kindergarten. We lived in East Haven, and we chose North Haven. North Haven, our schools were in the top 10 in the state. In the past 20 years, I periodically bring up at a meeting asking the Board of Education, why are you re-ranked number 50, 40, 60, 65? We are below the 50% percentile. Every year the superintendent just looks at me like I'm crazy. I asked them to investigate, never came back. Our school system is not today what it was 40, 50 years ago. Mike, the head, on the Hartford Turnpike, there's something about a headwater?
Head wall.
What is that?
Head wall is, you live near there, Sherman, so when you come out of Marlin Drive and you look to the left, the water comes out of Marlin Drive and channels through Marlin Drive into a head wall that is on the west side of Hartford Turnpike. It's a concrete wall with a pipe in it. That wall is crumbling and crushing. So that's part of us enhancing the drainage system through Sherwood, because if that crumbles and crushes, there'll be floods over there. So, and the floods will be across the highway,
Yeah.
into the yards across the street, and it'll back up everything on Marlin Drive.
So that has to be repaired.
That's what that is.
Well, it's a shame that we have all of this in 1 year, that we couldn't do a little bit every year as we go along, that you don't have people that look for things that are going to fail over the next year or two. So I know the roofs on the library and the pool, those are supposed to be 50-year roofs, I believe. And I guess we didn't get 50 years out of them.
Well, the pool roof, we're very concerned that if we don't address this right away, in the next 18 months, could become structurally unsound, and that's not a good thing. So,
Okay. Have we retired any bond debt lately?
we're always retiring debt, you know, and then we're adding debt. So,
Yeah.
as I've mentioned many times, in the next 5 years, probably in the 5th year, the debt will drop significantly here. So,
So we're pretty well pretty
Yeah.
well balanced.
Well, there was an increase this year, there'll probably be an increase next year in the debt, but I have a rating call coming up, October 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, so it's one of the topics that I'll be discussing and profiling the town. When we look at overall debt, our debt ratio to expenditures is much less than 10%. Not, when I say much less, about 8%, 7 or 8%. Our debt burden to grand list, very, very low. The rating agencies like these metrics, these numbers, so we are not highly leveraged. We, as a municipality, just to give you some perspective, additional perspective, by state statute, we can have up to $668 million worth of debt on the books and still be considered stable. We'll never get there. We will never have that much
Not
debt.
close, no.
We're anywhere from 80 and 90 million right now.
Not
Last
while
time.
you're there.
So,
I think you answered a question about separating the various projects on that $17.5 million bond issue, so that the people would be voting on individual projects.
that's right.
Next question is, it's a large amount of money, and a lot of people don't go to these meetings, as you know, it's less and less, usually special interest. Any way that we could put this on a referendum? And the fact that the referendum costs us a few bucks, we're spending $17.5 million. What's another 50,000?
I think it's too late, I think, so.
Too late to do
Yeah,
that?
It's too late to do that. Yep. So, here we are, September. We have the primary coming up next week, then the referendum in November. It's too late, so. Val?
Aren't a lot of these projects already, like, in terms of grants and looking for the funding
Right.
already
Yeah.
underway, some of
Yeah,
them?
so we
can't really.
If we went the referendum route next year, we'd lose a lot of the grant money.
Right, that's what I'm saying. yeah.
Right.
Now, all these projects that are over $20,000, I'm assuming that they're going to go out to bid, is that correct? They're not just going to be given to people?
Oh, no, we're a very rigorous competitive.
We were staying on that.
Absolutely, yeah,
I think
absolutely.
it's 25.
25, right?
25?
25, yeah.
25, yeah.
Sorry, I remember when it was, what, 1 or 2,000?
It was 1, then it was 7,500, and then it went to 25, which I think is the max,
Yes.
the statutory max.
And I think that's all I'm going to talk about tonight. Thank you very much.
Right, thanks a lot.
Sherm, I just wanted to make one follow-up comment
Yeah.
about your point about when the Board of Ed has surpluses, now they keep the money. The 1 year where they had, where I mentioned, I think it was 3 fiscal years ago, could be 4, the years click by so quickly. They had $1 million and then $7,000. They allocated that $1 million to some special reserve accounts, the medical reserve,
Special ed
ed reserve, and I fully supported that because those accounts needed a little bolstering, and so, I understand your point, and I respect and appreciate your point and agree with it to some degree, that they have been consistent with significant surpluses in recent years. But some of that surplus, that 1 year in particular, is striking out in my mind, and I thought it was very appropriate how they allocated it, they meaning the Board of Ed,
Which shouldn't those
into
things
badly
be-
needed special funds, yeah.
Shouldn't those things be part of the budget program and not the surplus program?
Well, it's hard to predict sometimes special ed costs and medical costs, so it's fiscally prudent to have healthy reserves for those. So I do appreciate your point. I'm not disagreeing with it, but I wanted just to say, because you asked me, you asked what
About the book, yeah.
prior surpluses were, and I mentioned one, but that 1 year in particular, I think the surplus was allocated very appropriately by the Board of Ed for supplementing some needed reserve accounts. That's
Well, if you
all I
remember,
wanted to follow up with.
I worked with the special needs children
Yes.
for about 7 or 8 years, usually the 3 to 4 year olds. Was the ideal. And I have to say that this town does a very good job on special ed, more than many. And people have actually moved into North Haven to take advantage of the special ed program. And there's one person in particular that moved from New York state by state down to Florida, and then came back to North Haven because this was the best deal on the East Coast. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Tom White.
Tom White, Summer Lane. I did want to offer a comment, another perspective as far as education. My experience in security at the hospital in the last 5 years, I've seen astronomical growth in mental health cases entering the hospital, particularly with the pediatric and adolescent realm. So I'm thinking that that could be a significant additional challenge for education. It's not only in the home that they have to deal with that, but I'm sure education has experienced a huge challenge with that. So that's something that can't be ruled out. So,
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Barrett.
Nancy Barrett, Crestview Drive. So I'd just like to congratulate Dot Logan. I think she made a really fantastic point about the air conditioning system. I think we all need to come to terms with climate change throughout our country. I have relatives who spent some time in Arizona, and it was 120 degrees every day. So thankfully, we're not dealing with that. But these are the next generation, and we really need to be thoughtful about the environment in which they're learning. But I'd also like to just point out that if, Mr. Frieda, you're talking to the superintendent about problem solving, I think that it's worthwhile looking not just at fixing this one problem, but really stepping back and looking at the educational system as in its entirety, and in particular the elementary schools. And you know, I'm just remembering the amount of money that we sunk into fixing the old police department, as an example. Fixing the leaking roof, fixing, you know, tweaking this, tweaking that, and then ultimately deciding, no, we actually need to just gut it and rebuild it with an enormous bonded project. So if the thought is at some point that we're going to be investing large sums of money in a new HVAC system in 4 different elementary schools, there might be some thought to just taking a beat to think in the same way that we thought about the middle school, and think about perhaps having a much bigger bonded project to build another elementary school, or perhaps a bigger elementary school, and consolidating some of these schools that are 70, plus years old. Again, just in the interest of being financially prudent, because again, we can invest, I think it was over $1 million estimate for a new roof at Ridge Road, as an example. It's needed. It's been leaking. It's been a consistent problem. There's problems with the rec center in terms of leaking roofs, with the gym and so forth. But there's just so much tweaking that ultimately becomes, throwing good money after bad. And so I think really taking a thoughtful analysis of all of the elementary schools. We're certainly going to be paying off the middle school and or almost done with the high school, but paying off the middle school for quite a number of years. But I think that this is something that is certainly worthy of attention. And as far as the projects that were presented this evening for the resolutions and ultimately calling for a town meeting for each of these projects that add up to about $17 million. As you mentioned, this is going to be temporary notes, but I'd like to have some sense for each one of these projects as to the timeline, because as we certainly learned from the middle school, when you have to have the money up front through debt and then you get reimbursed down the road, it was a long time before we could declare the middle school project complete and actually receive the reimbursement. So my guess is there's going to be a different timeline for each one of these projects. So to the extent that you could present some sort of a timeline, I think
Well, we're not going to know that by the 18th, because we won't know that till we go out to bid on the projects. We have no idea what the timeline will be by the 18th.
Right. Well,
So-
but some of them, like the $5.7 million renovation, I think is going to be quite lengthy, whereas others will hopefully be, within a 6-month period, so.
Yeah, I think that'll come in a subsequent meeting. Once we go out to competitive bid and hire the contractors, then we'll have a better feel for the timeline. For me to get up there and say the timeline on this is going to be a year, that would be irresponsible of me to do that until we hire a contractor to tell us what the timeline is.
Okay, so I had assumed going into this that we had some idea as to how long each one of these projects would be.
We don't do the projects. We have to hire people.
No, I understand. But in terms of estimating the costs, I assumed that the costs would be reflective of an estimate of time.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Not even the ones Val mentioned, some are underway.
Right.
So maybe, whatever.
Whatever, so.
We'll do our best.
Okay.
That's all we can do.
And the projects that are underway, are we incurring costs associated with those projects being underway because we haven't actually approved the projects yet?
No, they're underway in the sense of planning stages.
Just planning.
Right.
Got it.
So
Okay.
And grant
Oh,
application.
right.
Sure.
Right.
Right.
That's what you mean by
that's the
underway.
underway.
Okay.
Got it. So not actually doing
no.
the
Okay.
work itself.
Yeah, underway is I wasn't quite sure what was
Underway.
underway. No,
Thank you for clarifying
that makes sense.
Town personnel's efforts in moving these forward, that's underway.
Got it.
And I just want to say again, Lynn Sadowski has done a fantastic job
great.
with her grant application efforts. And I know that is a major part, I think, of what you were referring to as underway. So
Yes, and her
that's-
track record has been very impressive.
It's incredible. So
Absolutely.
She is a gem of an employee, and
Lynn Sadowski is my right-hand person on these projects.
Yeah.
She's outstanding.
Yeah,
question.
I agree.
I work with her so closely every day. She is outstanding on these types of projects.
Absolutely. And then related to item number 17 that you read this evening, this $751,000 project, it seems like it's a bit of a catch-all category in which it's covering a variety of different things, including the lighting that was not covered by the $3.5 million athletic field bonded project. So, Mr. Frieda, I wondered if you might be able to provide some sort of insight as to why we're asking the people of North Haven, including everyone in this room, to pay twice ultimately for just the lighting component, and what is it about the $3.5 million project that kind of got out of control?
Well, you're a member of the Board of Finance. We've talked about this at the Board of Finance.
Well, all I heard was, as a result of inflation, we couldn't afford the lighting.
Right.
So I guess of the other things other than the lighting, what was it in particular that wound up being so much more expensive than we expected?
Well, there's various parts of the program. The $3.5 million did not get us what we had thought we were going to get. So the field changes, that came in much more. There were a lot of things. So the bottom line, folks, is that $3.5 million is not going to get us press boxes or lights. We're going to put the press boxes aside, and that's why we went for the lights. But so that we are faced with this in every aspect of this government. What we're faced with is the dollars that we have allocated do not go as far as they used to anymore. I've talked about road paving. I've talked about this for a year in terms of the inflationary aspect of this government. So we've already talked about this.
Right. Well, I just wondered in this particular project, if you recall what in particular, which component of it was
probably the moving
went
of the
over
DeMayo
budget.
field.
Went over budget.
That's part of it. There's a lot of parts to it.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's why. And as it turned out, once we found out that $3.5 million wasn't going to get us the lights, you can't have the fields done without the lights because there's a lot of night games and tournaments for high school and for the girls softball and girls high school, boys high school. So.
Okay.
This is a very complicated situation. Government is tremendously complicated, and you got to have people in government that understand the intricacies and know what they're doing. Because for someone to come in from the outside with no experience in anything to try to run any municipality, the tax-paying citizens are going to be they're going to have a problem. They're going to have a problem. This is the most complicated job I've ever had, and I was CEO of a billion-dollar company. That's how complicated it is. And yet, we're still among the best municipalities in terms of rating. So there are a lot of problems we have, folks, and this inflationary aspect is one of them. I've talked about road paving, how that went up. Everything's going up. So
And you had to prioritize,
And we have to prioritize, exactly.
which
Absolutely.
came back to, the press boxes, like you said, have really, would have been nice, but
Can't get it.
Can't get
So
it.
what we refer to this as value engineering these projects. All right, if the 3.5 is not going to get us what we're going to get, what can we get for, and what do we have to put aside? And in this case, what do we need to do to put the lighting up?
Right. I guess I just assumed with a director of procurement, in addition to yourself, that this might have stayed closer to being on budget. And I understand with inflation and so forth, but
Yeah,
it seems like $3.5 million is a lot of money.
It didn't go as far as we thought it
It
would.
didn't, yeah.
So, and as inflation continued to rise, particularly last year, 8.7%. This year, it's still up there, 3 or 4%. So there isn't a director of procurement in the United States that can predict what the costs are going to be on projects that are outsourced to other contractors who then come in with the bids.
Okay, and the last point, you mentioned that you're up for another early October meeting with the rating agencies, and I think we had discussed before possibly posting the rating report, both the last one and then, whatever they come forward with, because
Well, we
I
did-
think it would be really helpful for the people to be able to see.
And we did that, the AAA rated, we did that, so that we already posted the previous rating.
Oh, you did? Okay,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
on
think I
there.
saw, on the website?
It's on the
Or
website, right.
okay.
AAA rated. We're
I'll have
AAA
to go
rated.
look for that.
Now, we have to go back, and this is another thing, folks. I want you to understand what's going to happen on October 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Yours truly is going to be presenting to some of the smartest financial people in the world, S&P 500. And yours truly better be on his game, because questions are going to be fired, and I've got to profile the organization, present the corporation of North Haven, and be on top of every single financial issue in order to get this AAA rated, to be re-rated. So we're on the website with the last rating, and we'll know probably sometime in late November whether we get re-rated, AAA.
And then that will also be posted?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you so much, appreciate it.
Okay, seeing no one else. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.